Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you're having an enjoyable AUSA meeting. We're on day 3. We're going to finish strong, and we're really excited to have this panel titled The Northern Flank Land Forces Expansion and Modernization. As your professional association, AUSA is proud to provide forums like this one throughout the year that broaden the knowledge base of Army professionals and those who support our Army, as well as our allies and partners. That is why we were happy to support the efforts of our planning partners from the Danish, Finnish, Norwegian, and Swedish Defense Attaché offices to bring this esteemed panel to the AUSA annual meeting audience. On behalf of General Brown, AUSA's President and CEO, please accept the AUSA team's sincere thank you for your partnership. We're thrilled to have your Chiefs of Army with us. I'd also like to thank our moderator for this panel, General Daniel Hokanson, U.S. Army retired, 29th Chief of the National Guard Bureau, who will introduce our esteemed panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, General Hokanson.
Great, thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'll just kind of go over a couple of ground rules right from the start. What we're going to do is we're going to allow each of the Army Chiefs 5 minutes opening statement. From there, I'll go to about 2 to 3 questions, depending on time, and then we'll open it up for questions from the floor. So if you do have a question, if you could please use the microphones in the room so that everybody else can clearly hear the question. And I please ask if it is a question and not a statement, would be really helpful today. And the deadline we have is at 10:15, so we need to wrap it up. I'll do a last question as we get close to that time frame. And so today, the panel members we have today, as you see on the screen, from Finland, Lieutenant General Pasi Valmaki. From Denmark, Major General Peter Boysen. From Norway, Major General Lars Larvik. And then from Sweden, Major General Johnny Lindfors. One thing I would like to highlight today from our panel is we have 2 of the founding members of NATO and the 2 newest members of NATO. All countries are members of the State Partnership Program, with the exception of Denmark, which is actually going through that process right now. And if you're not familiar, it is a 30-year program where the National Guard, a state, pairs with that country to work on training and really learning from each other so that we all become better. One thing I would like to highlight about the Army Chiefs from the Nordic countries, they are not only the chief of their military, but they are also the commander of their army. So they actually command forces, which is different than the United States Army. And one thing lastly I'd like to do is, you'll see the map, particularly the one right there. Now, when you look at a map of the world in the United States is in the center. And you have Canada to the north, Mexico to the south, and we're surrounded by the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But when you look at the globe from the North Pole, you realize just how strategically important the Nordic countries are with relation to Russia, China, and really the rest of the globe, because those distances are much shorter when you go over the pole. So with that, I'll go ahead and start out with Peter. You can go ahead and start for you first.
Actually, I think Pasi will start.
Okay. So,
yeah. All good. Yes.
Yeah. This is, dear friends, this is the way we normally act when you get something. Okay, will you start? No, you'll start. No, I'll start. So, General Hokanson, thank you so much for the introductions. Thank you, distinguished audience, to taking part in this session from my side. After Sweden and Finland joined the alliance, NATO, the Finno-Scandian border stretches now over 1,400 kilometers. We understand what that means in Finland, in the Nordics, and I think also in the alliance. So the map that was on the slide is pretty good, depicts it nicely. General Williams, sir. And so what does the terrain look like? It's icy waters, tundra, swamps, harshlands, wilderness, 200,000 lakes, single narrow roads, forest with very few clearings, very small open areas. Engagement distances range between 300 meters to 600 meters. Only some places where you have an engagement distance of 1,000 meters or more. The population in Finland, 2/3 live within 4 hours drive from Helsinki, the capital. That's the only spot that was lighted on the map in Finland. And it's 14 hours drive up north. So very desolate. So what does combined arms maneuver look like there? So the battlefield geometry, the framework that you read in FM 3-0 or 3-94, Corps, Brigade, all that, it looks a bit different when you put it on the map in the eastern border of Finland. So we have to adapt our ways of fighting to the terrain, to the structures, and where the population is. And also, the Russians have a say. And we are very closely looking how they adapt as they learn from their mistakes in Ukraine. So we have to be very close by on that. Our doctrine is based on our war plans. We actually never left the Cold War trenches. We did take part in several operations in the warm countries, in the south and southeast, and in Africa, but we never left really. Our AUSA have always been on Russia. National defense, conscription, using nations' pool of talent for our defenses. So 97%, nearly 97% of our forces are reservists. So that's why we relate very easily with the National Guard here in the States. We have a lot of artillery, infantry, light infantry, sappers, engineers, but our key point is that we have enough firepower. That's what matters. Until 23, we stood on our own 2 feet, not trusting foreign assistance, except maybe some of our very close by friends, like we have a very long tradition with Sweden and Norway and Denmark, cooperating in many fields. But now we're in a new position. So our army modernization actually started in 2021, when Finland decided to replace its F-18s with 64 F-35s. So army requirements were key in this decision. So the Finnish Air Boss is my best friend, has been and it will be. We have F-18s, JASM, JSAW, JDAM, and the targeting capability for that. So we had our MDO in our national perspective. We could not be stovepiped. A small nation has to adapt and use all their resources together. Our modernization actually really starts after we have done the payments for the F-35s, and that means that 27 onwards we have money to allocate for the purchases and procurement programs. Before that, we have been compiling stockpiles, building stockpiles on existing equipment, ammo, and spare parts. And in order to maintain and create sustainable base for our existing systems, and legacy does matter. Our aim is in 2030s, but we need to keep our powder dry all the time, so readiness is an important thing for us. Therefore, what we've done now is we have started to adjust the ways we fight. So the effort started in the spring of 22, as we are starting to adapt how to fight with allies within the alliance. And we are refining our requirements for the forces and the hardware as we are training in new ways. So a few points on the new ways. Do as much as you can in the Nordics. Not an exclusive Viking hub, that's not the case. But we aim to maximize the utility of the existing forces and force structures, command structures, not to blow them up, but to streamline them to meet their current requirements. General Williams has been a great sponsor and support for it. He has enabled us to work with 5th Corps, with Charlie Constanza's Corps, in developing interoperability through exercises. From the Corps level, company level to the brigade level. 310 was in Finland in the early months of this year, and that was an excellent example of how we bring and train not only there are some pieces, which was done with the 21 TSC, great partner in developing understanding on the sustainment part. 56 Artillery Command and 19 BCAD have been essential in us developing deep fires capabilities, JJIC capabilities, and now dynamic front in the fall. And Russia will observe how we do fires up north in November. 18 Airborne Corps with Maven, a Smart Suite package, delivering fires, and then complementing the MPE. Ten Mountain has been mentoring us with JJIC, Fires, Army Aviation, and we've been partnering with them. So it's really exciting times with cooperating with the US forces. And also to remember that UK, ComArc is here, and we'll be doing wargaming in a couple of weeks' time in Finland on seeing how to employ NATO's strategic reserve up north, and then they will continue with with Dynamic Front, delivering fires up north, establishing us an understanding what does it mean to be a multi-corps land component command. That changes our ways of doing things in the Army HQ that we have now. So the Land Forces headquarters we have in Finland will stand up an MCLCC capability in the next 2 years. And we need help with that, but I have no doubts we'll be successful in that. And also we have to remember there's many other nations and partners we have worked together. We're learning as we're doing. And it's okay to fail in peacetime because you learn from your mistakes. So that's why we're pushing really hard with the training efforts we have. Maybe the last thing about the Nordics is, at least from my point of view, it has been important for us to do as much cooperation as possible so that we cross-develop, cross-buy, cross-train, cross-use the material in order to have security of supplies up north, because we are quite desolate there. So we need resilience. And for this industry, I would like to say that don't just look at one single nation, but look at the 4 nations and how you can build a wartime economy up north. So we need to have that kind of thinking in the back. So I'll leave it at this. Thank you,
Great.
sir.
Thank you, Pasi. Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this opportunity. As already stated, Norway was among the founding nations of NATO, and that's because in 1940 we learned the hard way. There's a difference between friends and allies, and that's also been a very, very key element in our defense and security policy since 1949. Is that we expect to plan, or we expect to fight with our allies. And having Sweden and Finland as a part of NATO is actually the first time in 500 years the Nordic countries are a part of the same alliance. So it is definitely historic. Then going to and sharing some of our perspectives on modernization and expansion. The Norwegian Parliament this June unanimously voted and decided on the defense pledge. That defense pledge will mean Norway has now, we will pass 2% of GDP and moving towards 3%. It's also a long-term commitment, so it's not 1 year. It's actually for the next 12 years. The Parliament has decided to spend a historically large amount of money on the armed forces. A large portion of that will be used to modernize the Norwegian Navy, especially with new frigates and more submarines. Also, because the helicopters in Norway are organized as a part of the Air Force, we will then also acquire new helicopters both for the Army and the Special Forces. Looking at what will happen with the Norwegian Army, we will triple in size over the next 12 years. Meaning we are going from a battalion, 1 brigade type army to a division army. This will allow us to meet NATO force goals, also take a larger part of the responsibility for our own and NATO's security in not only Northern Europe, but wherever NATO demands. We will have a force consisting of heavy elements armed with Leopard 2 A8 main battle tanks, CV-90s, K9s, ranging all the way down to very, very light Ranger type Arctic Rangers and long-range recce suited for operating in the far, far north. We're also investing into 21st century type of division capabilities. That includes a modern intelligence regiment, layered ground-based air defense systems, long-range precision fires, 300 kilometers plus, which we are in the process of looking at different options now. And maybe most important, a modern C4IS suite, which will allow us to integrate as a part of our national joint force, but also with NATO, and striving to become platform agnostics in regards to communication systems. Also, when tripling the Army, the amount of reserves will increase. We're going from today having about 20% to about 50% of the soldiers in the Army will be reservists. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very excited about the State Partnership Program and our cooperation with Minnesota National Guard. I think what we are starting here is State Partnership Program 2.0. And I'm really excited what we can do together in the years to come. And finally, on the expansion bit, and also this is not only the Army, it's the Norwegian Armed Forces. We are really reinforcing our ability to provide host nation support. First of all, it's about providing good training venues for all our allies to come and master and train in the Arctic environment. This is also, from our perspective, mission rehearsals. Every time a soldier, an allied soldier or an allied unit comes to Norway, it actually allows us to rehearse on how we can support allies coming in as a part of defense of Norway and NATO. It also gives us an opportunity to mobilize our total defense, the whole of the Norwegian society, which will allow us to support allies with everything from logistics to transport to whatever is needed, and thus reducing the logistic tail of any allied units coming into Norway. And this is not only allied units coming to Norway to fight in Norway. We think that we must be able to support allies coming into Norway to operate in the Nordics, in the Baltics, or in other parts of Europe. So this is a greater task than just the units that will operate in Norway. Looking at modernization, I'm going to cover 3 topics. First of all, we're looking at how we can standardize. And a concrete example of that one is that we are currently looking, the 4 of us, at buying the same infantry fighting vehicle. And I'm using the term same, not identical, but we're striving to more towards as identical as possible. We think that is, first of all, it makes sense because we're going to fight together. We also believe that is going to make sustainment, training, everything better. But that's one of the ways we're looking into modernizing the way we acquire equipment. The second bit is in regards to acquisition, is we are looking for parts of it to become more incremental. Instead of, I think we all recognize those large programs, having smaller programs, but that run annually. And that's especially important where the technological development is fast in like UAS, AI. We need to change the way we acquire our capabilities. And finally, and most important, the most important thing for me as the Chief of the Army as we modernize is the soldier. We are modernizing the way we do basic training for our conscripts, for our NCOs, and for our officers. And maybe more important is we're looking how we can improve our ability to retain the soldiers and that we have trained. To do that, we are looking into how we can make the career path more flexible. And we also believe that if we can provide a combination of mandatory and individually chosen education, that will actually keep the best soldiers in the Army instead of leaving. So we're looking at having a much more modern way of educating our soldiers, not only for the first years, but throughout the career. I'm really looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Lars. Okay. Shani?
Hey, thank you.
So, first of all, crew, thanks for being here. It's an honor to sit here besides my brothers in arms up north and doing this panel in front of you and under the lead of General Håkansson. So thank you. And coming to modernization and the growth force for Sweden, we have 3 drivers. First one, obviously the Russian aggression. we need to prepare for war. The second one that actually is derived from the need to prepare for war is the Swedish accession to NATO, which kind of changes how we look upon ourselves and the role of the Swedish Armed Forces. And the third one is obviously the pace of change in technology, as already been mentioned. But to us it means we need to shift and change the doctrine. We need to be able to contribute in multi-domain operations and fighting at echelons again. So we optimized the Swedish Army for battalion-sized task force out-of-area operations during the era of Afghanistan, Mali, Iraq, and so on. We're now in the process of reconstructing the force and getting ready to fight in echelons in the large-scale operations. It's also a mental shift for the Swedish soldiers. Looking at this map, there's a water body between Sweden and the Baltic states and Finland. We're going to defend east. We've always seen ourselves and made the plans to defend Sweden in Sweden, on Swedish territory. That's a shift, meaning that we have to adapt the forces, the force posture, and the logistic footprint. But we also need to be able to fight and win the close fight. And just as General Wellemäki said, the terrain up north and the geography, the battle space geometry, doesn't really support designing forces by the NATO cookie cutter. Infantry brigade heavy, according to NATO standard, might not be the most suitable or useful force to fight in the very high north in the subarctic region. When there's one single road, it's hard to sustain, and the ranges you have to fight in is a lot longer than the reach of one single artillery battalion or battery. So you have to divide the forces in a different way in order to be able to cover the areas that you need to cover. Coming back to technology and the pace of change, taking the CV90 as an example, we have a fairly large number of CV90 infantry fighting vehicles. The Mark 0 version, the first version of it, it's an excellent gun, armored, protected personnel carrier. Looking at the newest generations, the Mark IV and so on, it's a sensor, computer, networked, active protective system with a gun, rather than a gun with protection. That means something. We need to increase connectivity. We need to increase our capabilities in electronic warfare, which we are doing. Counter US and US, everyone is talking about it, and I guess pretty much everyone in this room has some kind of focus on it on this event, and we're doing it too. We're trying to manage the fact that the transparent battlefield also call for a revival of camouflage, concealment, and deception. Not to hide, because it's very hard, but to slow down identification and make it harder to identify the very high value targets in order to gain the time to move. Coming back to the force structure and how we prepare to fight the fight in East. We're adjusting to fight in brigade-size units, division units in a core structure. So we're setting up a division, a brigade in Stockholm region, a brigade combat team on the island of Gotland. That's super important, and the Danish Straits are always very important. But we also need to create reserves. And I have the benefit of actually having the conscript system to create the mix of professionals, which are a small portion of the Swedish Army, and mobilizing forces and conscripts that make up the major body. So I'm not tasked to triple the army, but I am tasked to double it. So we're going from about 100,000 or 50,000 personnel, aiming for 100,000 personnel in a division structure with a number of individual brigades as well, with ranger battalions, and we are reinstituting the territorial defense forces. So the field army will go east. The home guard that's already existing, that by themselves are constituting an additional another 25,000 personnel. They are designed for surveillance and protection in a pretty static manner. But we need to create the territorial defense forces that can execute protection, escort, mobility, and wet gap crossing to be able to support the role for Sweden that we foresee being enablement, a sustainment area, a transit area, just like General Lerwick was saying. But also, once again, looking at this map, the shift in doctrine, something we have to relearn or actually learn for the first time, is the air-land integration and the implementation of JADGIC and targeting, because we've always been thinking in a sequence. So the Air Force, a capable force, a fairly large Air Force for being a small nation, they were supposed to defend east first. They were supposed to attack the Russian landings or air assaults. The Navy were supposed to pick up the pieces, and the Army was designed to rush down to the coast and take care of whatever was left. So coordination by separation. That's not how it's going to look in the fight in the eastern border. So that's something we're relearning or learning, and we're getting a lot of help from General Williams, from 5th Corps, Charlie Costanza, and also ARC, who are holding our hands and doing a great job. And also in his former position as Commander 11th Airborne Division, General Eifert has also been really supportive. So we're getting a lot of help. We are making huge investments, and we are a capable force. So that's us.
Great. Thank you, John. Peter?
Thank you very much. It is indeed an honor to be here today and to be allowed to speak to you. When we expand and modernize the Danish army, we have to look on the map. Denmark is a kingdom. So we have Denmark sort of as the smallest country, smallest Nordic country. We have the Faroe Islands in the North Atlantic, and then we have Greenland, this great mass of ice in the North Atlantic. So when we talk about the Arctic, we talk about the North Atlantic Arctic. I think that's important to understand. The Danish government also realized that maybe it's time to invest a little bit in defense. So we are up over 2% now, and we will expand to 2.5, maybe even further. The focus for the expansion and modernization of the armed forces is our membership of NATO. We have the NDPP targets or NATO force goals, and politically it's very important for us to live up to those goals. So if I can, as an Army Chief, justify investments related to NDPP targets, money will come. So that's, I think, important to understand. So the obligation to collective defense is very important to us. Secondly, it's very important for us to be able to defend our nation, homeland security. So having Denmark, the focus, we don't have a direct threat, a land threat against Denmark as such, but we need to be able to provide host nation support, as mentioned by the others, to allow reinforcements to come into Europe and to deploy into the wider theater. So that is also a focus for us. Hence, we have a lot of NATO force goals related to host nation support, enablement, and strategic logistics. Denmark will find itself in two joint force commands. So we will have part, and the army will mainly fight in Joint Force Command Brunssum's area. So that means we fight in Latvia. So we have a divisional headquarters in Latvia, and we have to build a heavy brigade with CV90s, Leopard tanks, and all the rest of it, and actually deploy into Latvia. Then we need to be able, from an army point of view, to take care of Denmark, but we also need to be able to support the other services taking care of the Faroe Islands and Greenland. And in order to do so, and in order to gain mass, we have reintroduced a new conscription. So we have moved from 4 months to nearly a year now, and that is our way to create mass. We also need to, we cashed in the peace dividend. So when Russia attacked into Ukraine, we were left with an army that was very good at deploying to a very hot place and chase one guy on a moped. This is not what we are doing anymore. Now we are fighting a major combat, so we need to transform the army to be able to participate in major joint operations in a multi-domain environment. So that's also key to us and key to training, to the training of our young NCOs and officers. We still need to retain a capability to deploy into where the government will decide we have to go internationally, be that Middle East, Africa, or other places. But the main focus right now is to be a good alliance member and to be able to defend the kingdom. And we are looking so much forward to participate in the SPP program, because I think we can gain from that, and hopefully whatever state will chip in and support us will also be able to gain from that. I think I'll pause here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. Well, thank you for the a quick opening statement. I know some of you touched on the first question already, so what I'd like to do is open it up a little bit. And so when you look at what we're seeing in Ukraine and the new NATO membership of Finland and Sweden, if you could describe how your modernization priorities may have changed, not just equipment, personnel training, but also, if you've covered those already, the competition that you find with your naval and air forces when it comes to the resources to make those modernization priorities happen. So, Pasi, we'll start with you. Go with the same order for this question.
Well, thanks. A good question. Is there service rivalry? Nope. We know that we have to fight together. So that's why the Air Force is my good friend. Navy is a bit smaller, and it's brown water Navy. And I think the key thing is to understand that how do we build all this together in the wider context of NATO. So there's a lessons learned. Like I said, we're looking very closely now on what's happening in the Ukraine and how Russia is adapting, so that we think about lessons learned, not only what kind of conclusions can we draw from it, and what does it mean to us. So we have to adapt, so you can't do a cookie cutter, that, okay, they do this, but there are certain elements that we have to look, and key thing here is the UAS, the unmanned capabilities that exist now, but they are not replacing the hardware. So you have to balance, and we're a huge army, so 280,000, of which more than half are our army, and they're reservists. So to change something, you really have to think through what do you really want to change, and is it for the good? So I'll leave it to that. So
okay.
Is there inter-service rivalry in Norway? Yes. Is that a problem? Not really. But of course there is rivalry here. But I think where we are now, there is a recognition that, and that was the decision in Parliament was based on the very, very clear advice from the Norwegian Chief of Defence. And that was to have a balanced force. That's what we are striking at. But if you look at the map, we have a substantial part of our territories are made up of the Atlantic. So it means we need to be able to do a potentially in the North Atlantic, a typical maritime air type of fight. We need to be able to do a more amphibious type of fight along our coast, and we need to be able to do a more typical kind of air-land battle inland. And that's what we are trying to have the capabilities to do with a rather small force. In regards to lessons from Ukraine, I think I've covered quite a few of them. One of the things I would like to point to is it has really underlined the importance of learning how to learn. We must be able to update literally the software in the trenches as we experience and learn while fighting. And that has been potentially a little bit different to the experience we had the last 20, 30 years. So that's one of the things we're trying to implement into our culture, is being an army that learns while we are fighting and adapts as we are fighting. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. So, service rivalry in Sweden, of course, but also in a very balanced way. I mean, we have an industry base of producing aircrafts that we're really proud of and need to sustain. We will allocate money to keep producing fighter jets. We also produce naval ships and submarines. And being a small nation, that's costly. It takes resources from the army, but I would not want to live without the submarines and the capabilities that they can provide in the Baltic Sea in order to be able to cross the water body and to dominate it. So it's a sound rivalry. And currently, the majority of the expansion of the forces are on my side of the field. So I'm happy as a clam right now. Adapting to Ukraine, it's already been said, but what becomes very clear to me is, okay, we're investing a lot in air defense as a direct result of Ukraine. EW, electronic warfare assets, also big investments. The mass of force, I would not have been tasked to stand up as much reserve units as we're doing if the experiences from Ukraine wouldn't have been so obvious. But also being able to breach obstacles, wet gap crossing, and as Lars said, the capability for tactical analysis and adaptation on the battlefield to change tactics and equipment at the pace of change. So,
okay, great. Thanks, John. Peter?
Thank you. Inter-service rivalry, yes. The Navy and the Air Force has always been up north, and we had to retain those capabilities. Also, when we didn't have Russia as sort of an imminent enemy, so they were sort of up and running. So what we paid in the Army the peace dividend. So there was the most potential for investments in the Army. So I think I won the first round in the Army of defense spendings, which is nice and needed. In terms of Ukraine, I can only echo what has been said. Long-range precision fires, EW. Also headquarters. We're looking at our headquarters concept because I guess everybody in here has read the article, The Graveyard of Headquarters. And we need to be much smaller footprint, because otherwise we will not exist anymore. So this is a thing we are putting a lot of effort into investing in. And then the changing mindset from fighting a battalion fight into fighting brigade, a division, corps, and multiple corps component. So this is the focus of the Army right now.
Okay, great. Okay, for the next question, I'm going to reverse the order here. And so I know a couple of you have talked about the need to expand or increase the size of your military. So I would ask you how military service is viewed in your country, and if you see challenges in recruiting and retaining the number of personnel you need to fill your formations. So Peter, over to you.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we changed, so we have a longer conscription right now. Conscription is very popular. So we don't have to conscript. Actually, people volunteer into the army. We have had historically a problem on retention, so we invest a lot in the individual soldier, but they don't stay as long as we want them to stay. So we have put a lot of effort into making it more attractive to take up conscription and to stay in the army. So initiatives on the state paying civilian education after when you leave the army, better pay and better sort of conditions for being a sort of a private and NCO soldier. So this is what we're investing in, because that's necessary. Because we put a lot of effort into training, and we put a lot of effort into investing in the individual soldier. But if you can't retain it, that's not bang for the buck.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you, Peter. John?
So we have the same situation as I mentioned. Being able to draw on conscription and being able to grow the force that way, that's the beneficial way, or the situation we have now. The youth actually compete to do their service rather than trying to avoid it. But when it comes to the professional soldiers and the officers, we have the same issues as everyone else with retention, because the construct of families of today put new demands on two parties in the families working. Many times the spouse have a career that's more important than the soldier or officers. So we're working on education, on benefits, but that's a challenge. So a dual problem.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lars?
Thank you. Yeah. Also, conscription is a key element which we have retained. We are changing, so it's more flexible from everything from 6 to 18 months. The majority will do 12 to 15 months. And it's for all practical purposes, it's voluntary or competitive conscription. 12 to 13% of the year group will do the conscript service. 30% women, 70% men. And we're looking to increasing that to about 20%. Very, very strong support in the Norwegian population for conscription. This is also reflected when we're looking at how we recruit. Most of our officers, NCOs, and of course enlisted, are recruited from the conscripts. So we have generally about 10 applicants per enlistment or place at the NCO Academy or Officer Academy. So it's really, really happy with that. Retention is the issue, and I already mentioned some of it. And we as an army have to recognize that we will become younger. We're tripling the size of the army, so we will become younger no matter what we do. So we need to set up a system where our young officers and NCOs will get the training they need when they need it. And that's a part of the modernizing of our training and education system, is to make sure we can do that. And I also believe that will, I believe that will help in retention as well.
So, frontline nation, and Russia and Mr. Putin has provided us with the motivation. So it's quite understandable that why we are defending Finland. So the motivation is number one, and according to our polls, which we do annually for the past 40 years, is that we assess the national will to defend Finland even if the outcome is uncertain. And men and women, over 85% says we're ready to do that. So there's cohesion and there's clarity, and Russia is just making it more firmer than we have before. So that's motivation number one. Then it comes to the question of trust. The Finnish Army is, as an institution, and the FDF as a whole, is one of the top 3 most trusted agencies and institutions in Finland, and most respected. It doesn't come for free, so we have to earn our right for that position, and it's about trust, so we can't take it for granted. So we have to adapt that. Likewise, as my colleagues have just said, how do you adapt and change in time? And when this Monday morning, when we were at the opening ceremony, everybody could hear and see how the US is changing. It wasn't the military band that was giving it was welcome to the future. And that really touched me, because it is how you need to reach out and touch and connect with the younger generation, because they are our future. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. So it doesn't we cannot be certain that and take for granted the will to fight, the will to defend. We have to work and earn that trust every day.
Great, thank you. So, because I've got one more question, and so if you've got questions in the audience, please, if you want to prepare those, and go ahead and move to one of the microphones here in just a minute. The next question I have is for our two newest NATO members, for Finland and Sweden. When you look at being a NATO member now, how do you see the response from your citizens to seeing potentially large numbers of NATO or US forces in your country for training events or otherwise? Johnny, I'll start with you.
Hey, thanks. So I think there's expectations among the populations. I think that's actually been one of the issues or topics that's held back Swedish NATO partnership or membership being a part of the alliance up till now. So there is a divide, but it's a huge minority that expect U.S. troops and other nations, NATO nations troops, to train in Sweden and have a presence. So I think it's very welcome and something that has been, we've dwelled over it for 70 years, and we came to the conclusion that this is the right thing to do. So it's expected.
Okay.
Yeah, well, sir, you know that the Finnish people like to keep a social distance. About 5 meters is good. so 2 meters during COVID was a bit angst for us, because we had to get closer. Yeah. So in this sense, we are going through a cultural change. We've always stood on our own 2 feet, never trust the foreign assistance. But now we're learning, and I think the exercise programs and exercise and presence being there, training with us, staying with us, not just come and visit, but stay a longer period, is essential, and the population is open-armed. So, hey, we're not alone anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
We're good.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, for folks in the audience, if you have a question, if you could please use the microphones, and we'll open up for questions. Okay. All right, while you're thinking of questions, let me add another one here. One of the great advantages of the state partnership program that we had said is it is really working together. And in each of your countries, there are things that you are really good at that I think the U.S. military could benefit greatly from. One of those is the ability to operate in the Nordic regions, really in a climate that is, in many cases, unforgiving. One of the things we talked about within the National Guard is the fact that you have to operate, not just survive in those conditions. And so, Johnny, I'll start with you and just kind of work, just your thoughts on things that you have recognized in those unforgiving environments that are critically important to an army to be able to operate.
Yeah. So, first of all, we're super proud to be partnered up with the New York National Guard, and it's a new relationship since this fall. So we already had the TAG and his team coming up to the northern parts of Sweden and Boden, having these discussions. And I would say it's about, first of all, realizing it's not only about individual soldier skills and personal kit. It's about how to prepare units and formations for operating in the cold weather. Knowing the terrain, the geography, just as Pasi described in his initial speech, the terrain, how it shifts. One day it's a highway of ice that you can actually maneuver on. A couple of weeks later, it's mud, it's swamps and marshes, and it's unforgiving. So those are the things that first come to my mind.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lars?
Thank you. And this, I think it applies for all that is aiming to fight in the Arctic. It's the things covered by Johnny, that's a part of it, but also it's less about the equipment and more about actually the attitude, how you approach it. Because first of all, I think you need to be able to fight with the equipment you have, and being able to use that for as good as possible. And there's some lessons to be learned from the Nordic countries, but I think it's actually having really looking at what you have and how to use it. Then the other part, there are parts of it which you actually probably need to change, all the equipment as well. Lubricants, for instance, need to be adjusted to the temperatures which you will have to face there. And finally, some of the things we are talking about, everything being visible on the battlefield these days, and that's correct. However, in a blizzard, nothing is visible on the battlefield. So being able to master and utilize the weather conditions, which you will have plenty of up in the Arctic, is actually, for us, a serious force multiplier, recognizing that we will most likely be outnumbered at any fight. So we need to be able to utilize the blizzards, the heavy storms, for our own advantage, while at the same time recognizing that technology is making the battlefield change.
Okay, great. Thank you. Pasi?
So, good question. So we've had a relationship with Virginia National Guard since 2017, or a bit earlier even. And we signed a document just recently.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot without the necessary documentation, just keep on the straight side. First one in the Arctic or cold weather, you have to survive individually, then as a collective, and then keep your equipment operating. And then it comes then you can fight. There's a great wisdom in there's no bad weather, there's bad clothing.
Yeah.
So that means that when you go up north, you need to have your equipment set up right. And you need to get used to the climate also. So I think that's a challenge for any troops that normally guards operate 15 days or up to 21 days.
Yeah.
And that's not enough to acclimatize yourself. So that's a bit of a challenge when you come during the winter time up north, especially if you come from Virginia, when you're used to a bit milder weather than up north.
Yep.
Over to you.
Hey, Pasi, I thought you were going to say, don't eat yellow snow.
Yeah.
That's right. I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have to go there, don't, because that would be my advice.
Thank you very much, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. But if you have to go there, you have to be prepared, as just stated here. When we talk, and as I said in the beginning, when we talk Arctic, we talk North Atlantic Arctic, we talk Greenland, there's nothing. There's ice, and you are lucky if you survive. So again, if you don't have to go there, don't. If you have to operate there, you have to live there. So you have to live the country. So you just can't go and think you can operate. You have to live there and stay there. And so when we deploy our soldiers up there, it's a 2-year deployment, and you are on the sledge patrol on the northeastern part of Greenland. So yeah, that's the way it is. Okay. And you have to train very hard. You have to live it, and you have to have a special mindset also.
Okay, Lars, go ahead.
I agree with you. That's probably valid in Greenland, and of course, if you live up north in the Arctic of Norway, it helps. But we also, at least we need to recognize that basing our own security on being able to fight along allies, we need to actually make that possible.
Check.
So when I spoke about creating facilities for training for allies, that is part due to peacetime, making sure the allies can come in there and be fairly comfortable when they're not outside training. But it's also, I believe it's a relevant capability for crisis and wartime as well, because you will still get frostbites during war. Mm-hmm. So having those facilities, having the ability to provide allied unit coming in even during wartime, the ability to get used to the climate before they go forward is an important part of what we can contribute with for our allies.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we have our first question.
Good morning. My name is Tori with Joule Tactical Power, Quiet Tactical Power. This is a question, but I want to reinforce some of the key concerns that you've indicated up front. Recently, we supported the Ukraine Security Assistance Frankenstein effort, pairing U.S. systems and commercial technology with Ukrainian assets that were being destroyed in combat. One of the things we did was right-size a power solution for the S-300 radar and for the Buk missile system so again, quiet to address the threats, the heat, the thermal, and the acoustic targeting that's very real on a daily basis for any power system, legacy generators using fuel and all the typical ramifications there. Question for you is, are you considering, or what have you considered so far with operational energy, expeditionary power to cut some of that logistics tail? And I can give you, a really quick example. The S-300 radar, it has turbines, so when it pulled into location at first, you've got these aerospace turbines that are whirring, making a large noise, that great thermal signature, but with a portable power system that doesn't generate any of those signatures, you can operate quietly without detection, and then on the move and recharges, as you're going on the move through the prime mover, what have you, any power source. Just want to leave it there for your thoughts and feedback.
Okay. I'll open it up.
So I can lead off, and I mean, MCON is becoming really, really important again. It's probably always been, but we just did lose track of it. But emission control and knowing our signature is something we pay a lot of attention to, and we are looking closely at how to utilize hybrid solutions and electrical solutions. So we're doing demos and tests with electrified vehicles and trucks for sustainment and logistics in the rear areas, but we're not at the front line. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. First of all, signature management, camouflage has always been a part of the skill any soldier will have to master. And we now, as we're changing the basic training for the soldiers, the first few weeks, actually signature manager against an aerial threat has become much more important. Regarding the question about energy, we are looking at different ways to reduce, as you say, the logistical footprint, our signatures as well. And I think especially some of the hybrid technologies out there are really, really interesting. And we're looking into how we can utilize it as it becomes more common on the civilian arena.
Okay.
I would really appreciate if the industry would start looking at just the questions that you posed. Because if we start looking at it, it takes time when the industry already knows signature management. How do you do signature management on each equipment that you have? If you're trying to sell it up north, you need to take this into account. So I would really, really encourage the industry side, when you do R&D, to put your focus on this. Good question. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And I think, if I can chip in, we're doing the same, but especially the Navy is now looking into programs to be more sustaining and to lower emission. So that's specifically for the Navy and for the seagoing capabilities.
Okay, great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Lieutenant Colonel John Nessla from the United States Air Force. Question for the panel, and it really regards organizational structure or organizational approach. How are your nations absorbing the lessons and analyzing what's going on in Ukraine? For example, I'm part of a research task force that the Air Force is doing to study the conflict and write unclassified papers on what we're observing in Ukraine.
I can kick off. It happens at all the levels in the armed forces. I will cover on what we've in the Army has been doing. We actually created a task force in April 22 that was tasked to continue to look at and draw lessons from it. And we've been very, very cognizant on saying what we're looking at is observations. And looking at, okay, these observations that we can see from Ukraine, most of them on UNCLAS, open sources, what do they mean if you put it into a Norwegian type of unit and type of threat environment? And we are starting now to introduce some of them. I mentioned one about how we're changing basic training to adjust to the UAS threat. But it's a continuous process being run. And it's the Land Warfare Center that's in charge of it, because they are the ones who are in charge of creating the new training programs.
We have a cooperation between the Nordic countries also, where we look at this, and we benefit a lot from that, because our structures to do R&D was actually, they were significantly cut during the time where we didn't have to do it. So we need to reinvent that. At the same time, we're trying to learn from our brothers in the Nordic countries.
So yeah, except from the good cooperation between the Nordics, we also re-institutionalized the unit for tactical assessment and adoption in the wartime units. But we also have very competent agencies in the Swedish federal, among the Swedish federal agencies. One being the National Defense Research Institute and the Defense College that are drawing on lessons and helping us with that.
Yeah, I think most of it is covered. Then one missing link is talk with the Ukrainians. So we have a systematic cooperation with information exchange and knowledge exchange with the Ukrainians.
And actually, we learn a lot through industry, because our industry talk a lot to the Ukrainians. Yes. Because, software lasts, 3 months, then we have to change software. So the Danish defense industry has a very good idea of what is actually going on, what are the requirements within different capabilities in order to adapt to the new challenges on the battlefield.
Johnny?
Yeah, I would actually also add that training the Ukrainian troops are making us relearn or learn how to cut corners and how to actually stand up forces and the units in a pace that we could never dream of. So the day we need to regenerate troops, we have the method.
If I may add one more thing. General Pavliuk, the army commander, was visiting Finland and our headquarters, and we were looking at our map compared to his terrain, and his comment was, your problem set is very different from ours. So there's no cookie cutter here.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael Stewart. I'm from the Navy, from the Navy's Disruptive Capabilities Office, and also the chairman of NATO's Naval Armaments Group. My question is more just a question from your perspective. You all mentioned Russian aggression, and I was curious what you perceive the threat is. I understand Russian aggression, but specifically, are you thinking about territorial expansion, natural resources, coercion of the alliance, fight for the Arctic, protection of the Baltic, or see all the above? Like, what is it that you're thinking that Russia is going to go do against your countries? I'm just kind of curious. This is more of an educational piece, but born out of just not understanding how you guys are perceiving it.
Okay.
I can lead off. I actually think you can read it in President Putin's essay that he published in December in 2021. He wants to achieve a sphere of influence. He wants to restore the influence of Russia, and he want to incorporate Ukraine, the whole of Ukraine, into Russia. He most likely want to include the Baltic states into Russia, or at least as the sphere of interest. and he wants to have the influence of the region. For example, making sure that Sweden and Finland doesn't join NATO.
I think that, of course, there is, and I think Russia demonstrated that they're willing to use military power to achieve political gains. While at the same time, I also think we need to recognize they will not only use military power, they use all instruments of power, and we're seeing that playing out in Europe every day. So we have to recognize that, and thus I also think we must not be too, not focusing or not only thinking about one threat. We need to accept that there's a wide range of threats here. And also I think sometimes we mistake because we are trying to view the Russian intent and also threats with a Western type of lens. I think we need to utilize strategic empathy to actually try to see from Moscow what's their perception and thus what will be their choices. And I think we all need to be prepared to be surprised. History shows that we will be surprised.
It's easy to fall piggyback from what you said. Just we will be surprised by the actions at some point. Dana Mascott and Jack Watling said it yesterday pretty well in their panel that it's already ongoing. So we don't have to wait. It's ongoing, and we can see those activities in our neighborhood and inside Finland also. So it's ongoing already, and now it's the question of them prodding, and if there's a weak spot, they will utilize that. So, and from anything from normal hybrid protection of cables, electricity, water systems, all the way to war fighting. So the whole spectrum.
The only thing I can add is that I think we are in sort of a constant competition. We may call it crisis, not conflict, and if they can operate below the threshold of war, and as far as possible below the threshold of war, this is what we're going to see. And I think we as an alliance need to look a little bit into Article 3 and 5 and just find out where we are and how we can respond to that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, good morning to you all. My name's Tim Martin with Break and Defence. My question is just your view on the window theory, I suppose, which is that there's a 3 to 4 year period upon which Russia will reconstitute its forces. And so it's key now that between now and then, that this is the opportunity for Ukraine to win that war, to win the war, and beyond that, then, if Russia does reconstitute, then they could potentially steal a piece of NATO land. So just your thoughts on that, the general window idea.
I can kick off on that. Well, 2 to 4, 3 to 5. Well, I'm not too focused on actually assessing the window, because Russia is not the only threat. If you're looking at it's actually what is threatening NATO and our countries, there is a wide range of threats. So yeah, Russia would probably need some time to reconstitute sometime in the future. I'm more focused on actually being able to monitor how Russia fights today and actually how the force structure is being developed than trying to assess the time. And I don't think we have much time.
I think they are reconstituting as we speak. They are creating new armies to the north. I think our open sources say 2 years, then a threat to the Baltic nations would be imminent. So we have a window of opportunity now. So we need to use that window of opportunity to build our capabilities, because we need to be ready. And I think that's a logic we are sort of trying to explain to the politician. You need to invest now. We are already behind the power curve, so we need to be quicker. And to sort of expand on that, I would say that we need to talk to industry on how we can get more agile, how we can take more risk, how we can do it together. Because to introduce a new capability, if that takes 7 years, maybe it's 4 years too late.
I think you should also keep in mind that when it comes to Russian ground forces, they're tied down to a large portion currently. But when it comes to other other services and nuclear assets, long-range capabilities, and so on, it's still pretty intact.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep your eyes on.
I didn't think about the Russian readiness and reconstitution. I'm thinking about our readiness and how to modernize our forces. So it's like Peter said, the clock is ticking, and we started. The stopwatch was put on in February 22, and in April 22 we had a new procurement program bill issued by our government by 2.2 billion euros, which we are now getting the material in. So we started fast purchasing of spare parts, cashing in all the options we had on key capabilities like K9s. So we started that in order to maximize the utility of the existing force and its readiness. And then we're building from there on. So taking minimum risk on the operational requirements we have, or capabilities we have today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hi, Rachel Cohen. On the air side, there's the effort to create, a combined air operations center involving the Nordic countries, and I'm curious if you see a similar need for the land side. Is something like that underway, or what more can you do to make sure that you're integrated and you have more battlefield awareness from the land component?
I think that's your spot.
I think I can answer that. So the Finnish Minister of Defense announced 2 weeks ago that on Friday that Finland will build and host the MCLCC for North, and we're going to start working on it in Mikkeli. So we'll have the process has already started a year ago approximately, in order to be prepared. Now we have the authorization, start using money to change our structures, IT, and hopefully in this during next year, we'll have the first people on board, and we'll start exercising it. And we are already piggybacking the MCLCCs that are now in the build-up phase in Wiesbaden and Turkey. So we're working hard on it. But it's not just a Finnish effort. We're just offering the platform and the existing structures that we have, and then it's up to the nations to stand up and say, what do you want to contribute? And first of all, I'll be looking at these guys here, and we have already a consensus of how we're going to do, and then it comes to the war plans, the regional plans, and how we do the land tactical plan, and what kind of forces we'll have, and then we'll adjust the structures of the MCLCC accordingly. So I think we have a pretty good idea on how to go forward with that. Good question. We got a good copy on that.
Okay. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you. And our final question.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. My name is Cameron Hamilton. I'm a former Navy SEAL, so I might be the only Navy man in this room, but nonetheless, great appreciation for the Army. I've had the honor of training and serving with many of your forces overseas in Somalia, Afghanistan, and many other locations. I currently work for an organization called Professional Solutions Delivered. I wanted to know from your perspective, given the fact that you have difficult attrition rates and or retention difficulties in your armed forces, how are you partnering with industry in specific ways to facilitate innovation, development of new technology, to keep your war fighters, to keep your defense industry really cutting edge and on the next level? I say from example, so the American government in general has many bureaucratic and administrative inefficiencies with how we procure. I think you talk to any logistician, they could tell you a pretty lengthy story about some of the difficulties we face. I'm curious from your perspective whether you have those same difficulties or whether your nation has really rallied behind a partnership with private industry to keep your warfighter and your military machines on the cutting edge.
To be honest with you, I mean, in Denmark, we're not very good at that because we have European Union legislation that actually limits how we can cooperate with industry. I think with the Russian attack into Ukraine, different governments are looking into ways to change that and be more open to industry. So now we have a governmental issued public-private partnership program that allows us to have more interaction with industry without actually disqualifying industry from actually doing the tendering process. Because the problem was that if you favored some industry and not others, you could disqualify those that you wanted to have in. So we needed to change that. So that's one thing. Then also have shared risk between government and industry is a thing we're working at the moment. And also allowing us to fail with industry is now becoming a strategy rather than something we do not do. So this is what we're looking into, at least.
We have the same issues in regards to regulation and everything. And one of the things we have tried to speed up this is to create separate units in the Army with some of our best soldiers, and their task is to interact with industry and research. And these units are actually, as we are sitting here, we are doing that on the ground and experimenting, failing, and succeeding. That would not necessarily solve the issue about acquiring equipment, but it makes it much closer. And I'm hoping that can at least reduce the timeline for actually deciding what we want to do. And then the other bit is what Peter addressed. Okay, from I need this until I have it, that still takes way too much time.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can give one example of what we're doing. We've been tasked by the government as well to create a triple helix of armed forces, research institutes, and industry. And one way that we're executing it is together with these fellows, we're doing an Arctic strike exercise next year in March. We will facilitate a firing range, a C2 structure, some shooters, but we also told the industry, the defense industry in the Nordics, to raise their hands, stand up, and come surprise us, show what you got, and see what we can do together.
I'm pretty much in the same position as Peter described well, and I'm admiring Lars's capability and the way he has structured in the Norwegian Army. So kudos on that. So that's what
I think we are moving forward actually, because when we had to acquire the CV-NITA, the infantry fighting vehicle, there was a discussion in government whether to do a tendering process. But we knew we wanted that specific vehicle, and then there was a political guts actually to go and say we need this one, and then they sign the contract without actually doing it. But it's a political decision, and it demands the politicians to take responsibility.
But there's a challenge with this. When you go to a straight tender, you are cutting off the competition, and then someone's going to pay the price, and we owe it to the taxpayers to get the best bang for the buck. So we have to keep that in mind also.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for joining us this morning. And I would encourage you, if you ever get the opportunity to visit any of their countries, I highly recommend it. I've had a chance to visit all of them, and I was thoroughly impressed from day one and all the operations and things that we got to visit while we're there. And I think probably the biggest takeaway, aside from the conversation today, is to see how well-led, capable, and professional our allies are, as exemplified by the leadership. And once again, it shows that our allies as well, look at the caliber of people here, they get it right when they select the highest level leadership within their military. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. Okay.
Have a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, General Håkansson, for moderating. A special thanks to the defense attachés from all the Nordic countries who helped organize this, and a shout out to our AUSA organizer, Emily Call, for helping pull this together. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the show.